Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Q&A. Very exciting times. I'm back again today to do this because last time I did a Q&A, which was a couple weeks ago, I believe, you guys had so many great questions, which I feel like you always have great questions. And every time I'm going to film, I'm like, is anyone, or every time I put out like ask me a question if you have one, I'm like, is anyone going to have any questions? And you always have good questions. And I can't ever like touch on enough. So I'm going to dive right in without really giving too much of an intro, but I will say this. If you are new to my channel, hi, my name is Nikki. It's nice to meet you. And if you want, you can subscribe to my channel by clicking the button down below. Also, feel free to give this video a thumbs up if, I don't know what that was, 2 thumbs up if you like it. It really helps to support my channel. And it also lets me know what you guys like seeing. And I think you've been liking seeing these Q&As, which is why I'm back with another one. So with all of that being said, let's hop right in. So this first question is kind of 2 questions in one. And she asked, have you ever gone through a season where you've struggled with your faith, where you've been like agnostic or atheist? And then she also asked if I have ever had to separate myself or distance myself from friends who had very strong unbiblical thoughts or actions. So, okay, the first part, yes and no. How do I word this? You know, it's interesting because I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, kind of about this. And I was basically saying to her that like, I wish I had more confidence, meaning the way that I feel at this point in my life is that I believe there is a God. It's what makes sense to me. Everything is so perfect. The fact that, I mean, dude, that you can grow a person in your belly and then push him out and it's like, you're a person with a soul. Like Logan is 2.5 years old and I still find myself saying this every day of his life. I'm like, where did you come from? Like, wild to me. I mean, obviously, of course, everything else in nature, I feel like God shows himself through nature. So I have just felt very confident pretty much my whole life. Like there's gotta be a God. There's a God. And I will say hand in hand with that, my leanings have always been Christian. As you guys know, I identify as a Christian. I believe that Jesus, I always feel weird wording this, that Jesus was and is who he said he was and is. It makes sense to me at this point in my life for a lot of different reasons. But I will say this, I don't feel hyper specific, meaning the more that I have dove down theological wormholes, the less sure I've gotten about a lot of different things. The more that I've just felt like, man, I don't know what I think exactly. I know the general basics of what I believe, but like I've been exposed to so much and so many different ideas surrounding church history and different types of hermeneutics, and like which a hermeneutic, if you don't know what that means, just means like a lens, a way of interpreting scripture. I've realized that like, wow, so many different denominations have different hermeneutics in which they use to translate the Bible or interpret the Bible. And I don't really know where I stand on a lot of things. It's kind of frustrating, to be honest. But I also am saying this because I don't know that I believe that there's anything wrong with that. Like the friend that I was on the phone with, and I appreciate that, and that's what I want. She was like, I really hope you have more clarity soon. And yeah, sure, I do too. Who doesn't want clarity and assuredness? But at the same time, I don't know that I think there's anything wrong with that because I feel like the Lord knows my heart and he knows my desire for truth and he knows my desire to love other people. And I just believe that like I am where I am and like this is my journey and God's going to continue to show me where I need to go and show me truth and what I need to do and just all of that in general in life. And I don't need to be that stressed out about getting it right, if that's the way to word it, whatever right is, because I just believe he knows my heart. And I'm not sitting here just like chilling, doing nothing, going, whatever, God knows my heart. But I mean like in my exploration of learning more, of understanding scripture more, of different devotionals, different commentaries, all these different things, it's like, that's okay. I'm living in the context of time right now where I'm learning and I'm growing. So atheist isn't the right word, not even agnostic. Agnostic isn't even the right word. But I see a lot of Christians who are like very sure in their eschatology, like their end times view. They know exactly what they believe. Whatever. I mean, we could get super detailed here in the differences in different people's Christian walks, but I'm not one of those Christians. Now, what's funny about that, right? I can totally admit that there can be many thoughts happening at once. Like I've mentioned this before. I had an old counselor for a while who used to say emotions come in sets of 3. And really all that means is that emotions are complex, right? Like, and the perfect example is like, well, geez, anything really. My wedding day, giving birth. It's like getting married was one of the happiest days of my life. But I also felt sadness. I felt sadness because it felt like I was stepping into this new role as an adult and I was saying goodbye to my childhood, to this other chapter of my life. And they were both very real emotions. And I guess to bring that back to the Christianity thing, I feel similarly in the sense that like, even though I'm not one of those Christians that's that firm in my beliefs, like specifics of my belief, at the same time, I am searching for that, right? Like that's part of the reason I continue to dive down these theological wormholes. I continue to read scripture and talk to people that I respect and admire. And I've definitely gotten a lot more conservative, like in my Christian views, in my faith views, and just in my life views and where I think the state of the world is right now in terms of like how kids are being raised. And bless you, Zoe. We never even acknowledged the fact that Zoe's right here. Here she is. Hi, baby girl. She's so cute. I can't. Don't bark at the neighbors. No, the neighbors are biking by right now. Yeah, I've definitely become more conservative in like every sense of the word. Even like the faith aspects and what I'm drawn to is definitely on the more conservative side of things. So yeah. Oh yeah. And then the second question was, have you ever distanced yourself from friends who have strong, like unbiblical views? And the answer is yes. I will say I am someone who's like notorious, not notorious, but I have friends from like a lot of different walks of life, or I have over the course of my life. I will say, there's levels of friendships, right? Like, so when people will throw things in my face, like, do you even have friends that think differently than you? I'm like, yeah, I definitely do. I always have. But they're not my closest friends. They can't be, because ultimately the way in which I really view the world and the way in which I want to be supported by a friend, someone who doesn't have that biblical worldview can't support me in that way. But I will say, and whether this is good or bad, I mean, it really just depends on how you view things. I do have friends who are not Christian at all, who have supported me during some really hard times. So even though they don't have a biblical worldview and they actually acknowledge that, they'll be like, I know we come from different backgrounds, like very different backgrounds, and they've still been there for me. So it's not like those friends can't support me. But in terms of choosing who becomes like a close friend, it's pretty much only women that have biblical worldviews. And friends who don't, it kind of comes naturally that we're not as close. So we might be more like they're friends who I really appreciate their sense of humor, or we have similar, like more shallow interests in terms of like the arts or music. Well, I guess that is the arts, but that's kind of where those friendships tend to sit. Now, I will say I had way more of those prior to a year ago. Once everything unfolded with Bowser, and we were publicly, shamed and put through the ringer, a lot of people who don't have a biblical worldview kind of separated themselves from me. Now, that's not across the map. I have actually quite a few friends who are not Bible-believing Christians that stayed by my side, for lack of a better phrase, that did not decide that we were despicable humans and like ran away from us, and that thought everything that happened was disgustingly horrible. So it's not just like, oh, I was only left with Christians. And honestly, on the flip side, there are still a lot of people that profess to be Christians that decided that we're disgusting people. I mean, even if you look at something like being pro-life, yes, a lot of Christians are pro-life, But depending on, we'll use that word hermeneutics, depending on your hermeneutics and how you see the Bible and its authority and just Christianity in general, there are people that would identify as Christian that are not pro-life. They're not anti-abortion. So, there were Christians that left our side as well too. But it wasn't, in general though, as a generalization, I would say most of the people that I lost as a friend or left my life after everything that happened last year are people who are not Christians. Because in general, and this is general, right? I'm sure you could find a ton of people that identify as Christians that don't agree with me when I say this. But in general, the Christian worldview is that animals and humans are not the same. And the people that stayed by our side know us and know our hearts and knew that we're not liars and knew the gist of the situation. And if they're Christians, they also view ultimately that animals and humans are not the same. So there wasn't this same level of vitriol, if that's the word, like rage towards us, because they understood the situation. So yes, I have separated though from friends who have aggressively anti-biblical views. But I have been friends, and actually, as I'm thinking about it, I actually do have a couple people that have been close friends of mine that are not Christians, or they might identify as a Christian, but they're not necessarily like reading the word. They're not in church every week. They're not pursuing like more knowledge of the Lord and of scripture and all of that. So that was a vague answer, but here's the thing, and this might be bad depending on who you ask. I really like a lot of people. Like there's a lot of people that even though we have different worldviews, like I could casually be friends with them and like hang out and talk and laugh. And that is how, when people have asked how I navigated everything in LA, that's kind of how. I mean, yes, I have gotten more conservative, especially since we left, but I've always been conservative. Like, even if you really dislike him and you think he's annoying, I remember I used to be driving to like theater rehearsals in LA and I'd be listening to Rush Limbaugh. Like I've always been more on the conservative side of things, not only with my faith, but with, politics and social type stuff. But I was always able to manage it because I feel like I'm the kind of person that like everyone I meet, I kind of can spot right away what I like about them. Like, oh, they're really smart, or, oh, they're really funny, or, oh, they're very interesting because they have this cool hobby, or like, I just feel like my mind and my eye goes straight to what I like about someone. So it was always easy to just be friends in like a surface way and have a good time with people, even if they didn't see morality or whatever life is the same way as me. So that was a vague lot of answers, but there we go. Okay, number one goal for the next year. I'm very excited. I'm already moving this goal in action. And that is to launch my wellness cooking food course. I've already started working on it. The goal is actually to have it launched this year, and I will keep you guys posted. If you didn't know, by the way, that I'm working on this course, I am, and I will leave a link down below if you would like to join my waitlist for this class. I'm planning on launching it hopefully, honestly, within the next like 1 to 2 months. We'll see. It's going to be like my beta launch with a group of students that I can kind of work through this class on. The point being, I've been making food videos on YouTube and talking about food and just learning, honestly, nonstop for like the last decade plus. And so many of you guys have commented over the years that I've been able to help you with your relationship with food, the way that you see food, which I guess is kind of the same thing, your inspiration around food, the nutrition that you actually consume. It's just been videos that I've dropped. So I've basically come to the point now where I want to do something more formal. I want to teach a course and have it really be its own world, just all around wellness and food and nutrition and cooking. And so I'm finally pursuing that and doing it. And even though I want to launch this year, like within the next couple of months, I say it's my number one goal for next year because I want it to really be something that like I've honed in on my class. It's up, it's going. I've got like a good rhythm down with it because embarking on anything new is a little bit scary. And I have to say, my very first job that I ever had was being a teacher. I was a dance teacher for 5 years and I loved it. I loved teaching. I loved connecting with people in that way. And it was really great. And so that's what I'm doing now. Now I highlighted business first. Really, let's just say, I know I said number one goal. Let's throw out another goal, guys. I would like to have another child. I feel like I have to answer this every Q&A. We have not started trying yet. It's coming very soon. And I'm hoping to be pregnant and have a baby by next year. So, we'll see. There's also that phrase, you make your plans and God laughs. I don't want to totally throw that out there because also I think that like a lot of life is what you make it, but I ultimately believe that God's in control. So those are my biggest goals though. I feel like now I'm always like, do I have any other goals? What am I thinking about? Those are my main. Oh, and I just want to say one more time, if you are interested in checking out my class or getting on a wait list and being informed of when the class actually rolls out, it's not all put together yet, but I am making forward progress like every week and it's becoming a thing and I'm really excited. So I will leave the waitlist link down below if you'd like to join that. Okay, someone asked, did you sell your car and do you only have the truck now? And the answer is yes. We did. And we were actually leasing that car under our business, I believe, back in Nashville. And so we just turned it in when we moved out here. So yeah, so now we only have the truck, but you got to remember, we live next door to my parents. So I utilize their car from time to time when I need to go places, which I do need to go places sometimes because I've mentioned this before, but Dan has actually been doing work around the community. So sometimes I do need another car and we borrow their car. Okay, so someone asked, how do you teach Logan about our Savior? They said, I know he's pretty young, but any books? So, okay, here's the thing. To be honest, we are very organic about it. So I don't necessarily go out of my way a ton, but I will paint to you the gist of what we have done to make Logan aware of the concept of God and of Jesus, but it's really, I say that hesitantly because Jesus is a real vague concept for him right now. Like really a lot of our focus is around God. So for example, we pray with him. We've prayed with him for forever. Not only like before bed, we pray with him every night before bed, but we often pray before meals. We will pray for him if he ever gets hurt, if there's ever any kind of, injury or sickness. And, so he'll hear about Jesus when we're praying. My family they're pretty much all believers. So Jesus and God gets brought up to him just kind of regularly throughout the day. We take him to church, we go to church, so he knows kind of that that's a thing. I will say, like this morning, for example, I recently got this Charles Spurgeon devotional, and I've been enjoying reading the morning entry around the breakfast table. So we were reading that. I was reading that to the boys this morning. We do have the children's, I don't remember what it's called, like the Children's Story Time Bible. I don't remember what it's called. It feels a bit old for him right now. So yeah, a lot of our introduction to him about God, about Jesus is kind of vague-ish. Like we've definitely watched The Chosen a little bit around him in the past, but it's all been vague. So that's kind of the sitch right now with that. Okay, someone asked, do you ever eat fast food? My short answer to that is basically a big fat no. I pretty much never eat fast food. I'm super anti-seed oils or pretty much like PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids. And those are the cheapest oils. They're a product of the Industrial Revolution. They're not oils that we had access to or could make until the last like 50, 100 years, something like that. And pretty much because it's so cheap, that is what all fast food is cooked in, is in some kind of seed oil. And I think that it's highly inflammatory and bad for your body. So I can't say I wouldn't ever do it. I've started filming videos for my course that I mentioned. And I talked a little bit about that, about the fact that I'm not like, never about any of this stuff. I think this is actually how I have part of how I have such a great mentality around food is I really do live in like that 80-20 space. Although honestly, I think I live more in like the 90-10. I'm just going to be real. I really try to especially since the miscarriage, I really try to just feed my body nourishing foods. But I can't say that I would never eat fast food or I will never eat fast food. It's just if we're talking about my habits and my day-to-day life, like no, I'm never eating fast food. So, and I don't ever crave it or want it. So that's the thing too. It's not like I'm like, no, use discipline. It's like, I never have a desire for fast food ever. It just makes me feel sick. And it started making me feel sick years ago. Like, I will say I have eaten at a place called Rogers out here a handful of times, but it's a rarity that I ever go there as well. Okay, so someone asked, do you wish that you had never posted the video about Bowser? And I can tell, I know who this person is, that she's not like being a troll. She's actually asking me. And I will say no. I will say in my weakest moments, of course, I've had those moments where I'm like, I wish I had never posted that. It's a trip to have so many people misunderstand you and your motives and your heart and your situation in general. It's like a really big trip. But no, I don't wish that, because honestly, all of the people that decided to hate us because of that pretty much all glommed on to all of these other reasons that they've wanted to hate us. And if I wish that I had never posted the Bowser video, like I think it was only a matter of time, that's my point, till all of these people just decided they hated us because they glommed onto these other things that are also videos and content that I have on the internet. I would have to wish that I had never posted all of those other things, which is almost impossible because my whole internet experience has been this like unfolding of figuring out what I want to say, how I want to say it, content that I want to create. And you're just bound to not only make mistakes when you put out content online, but say things that you wish you hadn't said. But then on top of that, what's that phrase that everybody loves? Like, you could be the sweetest peach in the world and there's going to be someone that doesn't like peaches. And it's kind of a little bit of that. So really what the Bowser thing, the situation did, what posting that video did, was it clarified worldviews. You know, it shook away the people that like just don't agree with our entire worldview. And honestly, it's clarified my thoughts even around my presence on the internet in a lot of ways. And that's a whole other tangent I could go off on. But it is what it is. There's honestly not a whole lot of things in my life, if any, that I can think of that it's like, man, I really wish I hadn't done that, because so many things, I feel like you have to do it. Like the experience is what makes you learn and what guides you towards your next steps in life. So I feel like that's kind of corny. But yeah, I mean, it was sad. It was sad. It is sad. It wasn't easy to go through. I have a whole new view of people who get like canceled or publicly shamed in the media. I'm like, dang, people who haven't been through this have no idea. And if they did, if all those people did, they wouldn't be dogpiling people so aggressively, because it's pretty wild and really horrible. And it's really interesting that we live, and I've said this before, we live in this day of age that's like anti-bullying, like only love, spread the love. But then people are so willing to be like, well, I've decided that that's not love, and so I can go be unloving towards you. Like, that's evil, so I can be rude. It's like, man, suddenly the no bullying gets thrown out the window when they deem it's time to bully. It's crazy. They go, well, now's the appropriate time. There's a reason for my bullying. So now it makes sense. It's just very bizarre to me, but yeah. Okay, someone said, what new homesteading things are on your mind that you haven't tried before? Okay, so one of them I was just talking to my parents about yesterday, because my sister has a friend who I think is going to come teach us how to do this, which is exciting because sometimes there are things that like aren't that hard, but like getting started on them is hard. And that's how I feel about this one thing. And that is kombucha. I really want to make kombucha. And my sister's friend knows how to do it. I like bought the whole kit to make kombucha like 3 years ago, and I just never did it. It felt so overwhelming. You guys know it took me like 12 and a half years to finally get into sourdough because it felt so overwhelming. So that's similar for me with the kombucha thing. It's like, it feels a little overwhelming. I need a friend to walk me through it. So that's probably the main thing. I will say I'm excited next year, God willing, we'll see what happens. I want to learn how to can, because if we can get our garden to be more productive next year, more plentiful, I would like to know how to can things so I can save produce. I would love to make like tomato sauce and then can it, or pasta sauce, pizza sauce, whatever. So yeah, those are kind of two things that have been on my radar, is kombucha and canning. So someone asked me if I will be recording any more worship songs, and then they complimented me and said that my version of Oceans and Hosanna are the best. Thank you. I can't take full credit for that. Probably not even partial credit for that, honestly, because the people I was working with were like so talented. The whole time I was like, wow, I can't believe I get to do this, because they were just so amazing. So that being said, though, I mean, also, if you didn't know, guys, now you know. I have a Spotify. I will link that down below. And my music videos are all here on my Instagram. I don't know why this is here, but they're all here on my Instagram as well if you want to check them out. But yes, I have actually 2 really specific worship songs in my head that I would love to cover in the next couple years. We'll see how long it takes to like me getting around to that, because life is busy. I'm a mom. I'm trying to become a mom again of a second child. So we'll see what happens. But just know that I like literally have 2 specific songs in my head that I'm like waiting on pins and needles to find the right group of people and the right timing to cover it, because I think that they would both be amazing. I was about to give you guys more details, but I don't need to give you more details, but the songs really mean a lot to me. And I've mentioned this before, that like, I'm one of those people that like songs become my own meaning. Yes, I know people set out with meanings to the songs, but I do think sometimes in the Christian sphere, there can be a little too much like beating up on songs for not being in line with theology. And I agree with that in the sense of like awareness, I think is really important. And I understand that music is powerful and can pull people into things, just like in regular life with secular music, it can really pull you into a vibe that you may not want to be in, or like a worldview you probably shouldn't be adopting. But, I also think that like no one can tell you what you're thinking when you sing a song, and a song can have a meaning to you, and it can be between you and the Lord. So anyways, okay, next question. Okay, I'm using this as an excuse to plug my wait list again. Someone just asked me, how do you stay so motivated to eat healthy? And this is a question that I get asked a lot, which like I said, is part of the reason that I'm developing my course, because genuinely, like, I don't crave junk food. Like, I don't even really struggle with this concept of like eating healthy. And I will say, I will tell you this, besides the fact that my wait list is down below, if you feel like joining it and you want to get notified of when I start rolling it out. On top of that, I will say this, a lot of it is obviously mindset. And I tend to hold 2 things in my hands, like one in this hand, one in this hand, that I think are crucial parts of why I'm able to stay motivated to eat healthy. And on the one hand, it is that I've taken the red pill. Honestly, I've taken the red pill on the state of our food system, particularly here in the US. I've just been really real with myself. And I think sometimes it's, that ignorance is bliss saying can kind of be a thing, but it's not bliss if you're trying to stay motivated. Honestly, if you really want to be motivated to eat healthy and not even have to try to stay motivated, taking the red pill is a huge way to do that. Coming face to face with the reality of big ag, of just like big food in general, the food industry, of how much food has completely changed within the last 50 to 100 years and what that has done for our health. One thing that's highly debated, I've talked about this a little bit, actually talked about this in the first video of my course, and that is this idea, even let's take something basic like organic versus non-organic. People debate on that a lot. A lot of people think that it's pointless. I do not think it's pointless for a long list of reasons. But one thing that I will share with you right now, there's a book by someone named Weston A. Price, who was actually a dentist, and he traveled the world at the turn of the century, 100 and something years ago, to just check out different countries, different tribes, communities, and see how they ate, how they lived, how their health was, specifically how their teeth was. And through the book, they talk about a lot of different things around that whole topic in general. But one of the things that gets brought up is supposedly, okay? Everything I ever say is like covered in the word supposedly, because who knows whenever anyone's lying. But they said that supposedly, pesticides, so when produce is non-organic, they've actually done tests on that produce before. And for example, they've supposedly tested an orange that came back with 0 vitamin C in it. So supposedly pesticides are actually messing with the vitamin and nutritional content of the produce that is being grown. And that's not something that shows up every time. They talk about that in the book, that like when they've tested oranges, it's like some of them will have like 30% of the normal vitamin C. Some of them will have 20%. Some of them will have 60% of like the average vitamin C that's in an orange, but that they've actually tested an orange before that supposedly had 0% vitamin C in it. And I think that so much of the food that we can so easily access now is actually like frankenfood, for lack of a better phrase, and it can keep us alive, but that there are unintended consequences that have come hand in hand with it. We all know that obesity is on the rise, heart problems are on the rise, diabetes is on the rise, all of these things. And I personally think that it's because of what modernity has done to our food. Now, people will ask me, what do you mean modernity? I think I talked about this in my last Q&A. What I mean when I'm talking about modernity is really the Industrial Revolution and what that did to food. Honestly, it's a whole long thing, but I just want to say that is one of the reasons why I don't struggle with eating healthy. But on the other hand, okay, there's this saying that like people are more likely to run away from pain than they are to run towards joy. But I think it's helpful to actually implement both of those tactics. So not only personal pain, like if someone's wanting to make a change, whether it's for their health or their fertility or their kids' health or their weight, yes, we want to get away from that. Or in my mind, I also classify in that same group, like running away from frankenfoods, from these modern, like not really food. I mean, it's food, but you know what I mean. But then hand in hand in this idea of running towards joy is that I love food. Like I heard someone say recently, if you don't do like a little happy wiggle when you eat, like, are you really eating? And I definitely live in that camp. And I love the way that good, nutritious food in abundance makes me feel. And so those two things are kind of always center points of my mind, this awareness of what food really is nowadays, but then also this joy and gratitude towards good, real food. And I think a lot of us in general have lost that gratitude towards food because it's been made so easy to access. It's like, oh, just go to 7-Eleven and get some milk. It's like, man, you go back like 120 years, like accessing milk was like a totally different thing. And so I think there was naturally more gratitude that was ingrained into people in general. I feel like so many of us are living now in concrete jungles that just like getting food, it's not the same kind of struggle. It's a different struggle. Maybe you're trying to get the fake paper money to pay for the food, but it's just a different ball game. And so those are really the two things that live within me that I think contribute to the fact that I don't really struggle with eating healthy, eating in abundance, and having a positive mindset towards food. So yeah. Okay, so someone asked me, how do you keep your faith in God so strong despite challenges like the miscarriage? So this is where my head is at right now, which is part of why I'm a little bit attracted to elements of like Reformed theology. That's a separate tangent, but not really. It's kind of in the same vein. But what I was going to say is that I hold this belief. And it's partially, there's a verse that God works all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. But that general idea of like God working all things together for good is where my head tends to stay camped. I like in some ways view God as like the ultimate storyteller. That's a weird way to view it, but like he knows everything and everyone and everything, just like throughout all of nature, honestly, and everything we see in life, things come together so perfectly to work. And that's how I feel about tragedy as well. I feel like there's even a chance that as the person experiencing the tragedy, you will never even know in your lifetime why. Like when people, it's almost like I feel like I have a more nuanced version of the phrase, everything happens for a reason. Like, I don't really love that phrase, but I guess that is kind of what I'm saying. I guess just the difference is that I believe that our lives are like vapors and it just goes by so fast in the scheme of eternity, or in the span of eternity, that I don't think that we can ever fully know why something happened. I think sometimes we're blessed enough to see within our lifetime why something happened, and to look back and be like, wow, God led this to this, to this, to this, and now this. Like, that's a blessing to be able to connect those dots. But I don't know that I believe that you will always be able to connect dots in your lifetime. I think that like things, like everything leads to another thing. And sometimes a decision you make may affect your great grandchild. And it just took a long time for life to play out. And everything is so connected that I think everything just does affect everything else. And so that's really where my mind goes, is that God works all things together for good. And you may not see it in your lifetime, but to have that faith that he knows more than us, and he sees eternity, and he sees all lives. I just have to believe that there are reasons why things come together, and it may not be directly in front of us. I may never see it. I may never know, but I believe that is what happens. Does that make sense? Kind of. Okay. Someone said, how do you motivate yourself in your faith when there is so much anti-Christian media and just like in the media? Besides the kind of obvious ones, right? Of like going to church, staying in scripture, reading devotionals, watching sermons. It's also searching out and having those like-minded friendships with other people who are also believers, who are also flabbergasted at not only the state of the world, but the state of media, and who believe the same thing. Like, having like-minded friends in your life is really important. And if you don't know how to find them, use the internet. Start church hunting if you're not already in a church. And yeah, those are kind of my 2 tips. Use the internet and start church hunting, because having like-minded friends, camaraderie, fellowship, whatever word you want to use, is really helpful and really important. Okay, someone asked me at what age I started homeschooling. And I'm assuming they're talking about me, not schooling Logan, although she said in the thing that she has, I believe that's what she meant, that she has a 1-year-old. So I'll answer 2 questions. I became homeschooled in 6th grade, and I actually graduated high school. Well, I tested out technically at like 16, but I kept taking classes because I stayed enrolled at a local community college. That was kind of my plan at first, was like to take all these classes and graduate high school early, because 1 semester in college is like a year in high school. That's how it translates. But I ended up testing out early, and then I just kept taking college classes because I enjoyed them. I've mentioned this before. I took like every single history class because that was my favorite that the college had to offer. I found it fascinating. So I took all their like world history and US history 1, 2, 3, and all of that stuff. And it was really great. I loved it. Even though I don't love school, really what I particularly mean when I say I don't love school is I don't love what I did in elementary school, basically, which is going to school from like 8:30 a.m. till 3:30 p.m. and basically being in a classroom all day. But I love the idea of classes, and like going to a college was so cool because I didn't have to ask to go pee, and like it wasn't an all day butt in the seat type of thing. It was classes that I wanted to take, and that's how I plan on homeschooling Logan, and already am. That's kind of the second half of the question. For us, homeschooling started at like birth. I actually think for most people, homeschooling starts at birth because you start teaching your kids things, and then it just keeps unrolling. So he just keeps growing, and we just keep trying to match him and help push him a little farther in, his different life skills and letter recognition, and we're working towards reading and like, all that. So we're already on that path, and we're just continuing forward. But I've mentioned this before, the way that I see homeschooling, the way I experienced it and what I liked about it is it's really just the ability to have a custom education. So I was still taking traditional classes, but I was choosing what those classes were. I was choosing whether I wanted to be in them or not. And I wasn't, like I said, I was in college. So at that point I wasn't being treated like I don't know, what's the word? Like a child just breaking the rules for having to go pee. Like it was so school stressed me out a lot. But yeah, that's when I left in 6th grade. To be honest, 7th and 8th grade, I mean, I don't think my mom can get in trouble for me saying this. Hopefully she can't get in retroactive trouble. I don't know. California's a little crazy, so maybe. But we like flew under the radar for 7th and 8th grade and basically did unschooling because my mom was so disgusted with how like burnt out I was on school and education in general when I left. She basically said to me like, my goal is to make you love learning again, because if you can just love to learn, you'll be set for life, because all of life is about learning. And so 7th and 8th grade was really just that, was her trying to reclaim that for me so that I could actually enjoy learning. It was also a reframing of history, because when I left school in 6th grade, I hated history, because in my mind, history was just dates that you memorized and it didn't really mean anything. But when I left school, she really reframed that for me and helped me see how history is just stories about other people and the way that those stories unfolded and how they affected things, and now how it affects my life. And just, it's the story of people, of, you know, humans. And once I really realized that, how interesting that was, it became my favorite subject. And that is why, fast forwarding, I took every single class, every single history class that they had to offer at our local community college at the time, because I fell in love with it. And so, yeah, those first 2 years, I was straight up unschooled, off the grid. Like I didn't like sleep in and do nothing. She still had me up every day, like get up, time to get to doing stuff. And my main requirement was to read, but I was allowed to pick what I was reading. And we did a lot of like field trip type things, and it was really great. So in my opinion, and my opinion doesn't really matter because I've never actually homeschooled a kid, but coming from the perspective of being homeschooled, I don't even really know, like, if you're a parent that loves your kid and is like smart enough to live in the real world, which I'm assuming you are because you have a kid and you're watching this video, so you probably have access to internet, I feel like you can't really mess it up, which I don't fully mean that. And I feel like when I say that, it makes people mad. But what I mean is that I actually think that a healthy, thriving child wants to learn. That's why the joke is always like, why? Like they ask a million whys, because kids, healthy people, but children particularly, want to learn, in my opinion. And so if you're loving and supportive and you are like keeping an eye out for what their strengths are or what they're showing interest in, but maybe they don't have the resources for, so you can like scooch in there with the resources, or yeah, like I said, what they're showing interest in, I don't feel like you can mess it up. It's funny, but it's not funny because I get it. They're taking it seriously. But I know some moms that are like starting to homeschool their kids and they didn't come from a homeschooling background. And they're like very stressed about like getting it right, or like it has to be this particular thing. And I'm just like, yo, I'm not saying I'm an unschooler, but like low key kind of, or like I believe in it, in the sense that like, I don't think that schooling has to be like this super formal thing in order for the child to become educated. I think that really all that needs to happen is they have to be open and willing and curious and excited about life. And then there has to be someone to guide them, to plug them into the right places, to give them the resources that they need, to explain things to them. In fact, I think for a lot of kids, this whole idea of schooling, that's me being like a robot, schooling, can actually ruin that for them and make them think of learning as something that I don't personally think it is. I mean, here's the thing. This isn't to brag, because I actually think like when people go nature versus nurture, I think it's both. So this is not to brag, luck of the draw to some degree. But I will say this, now that that disclaimer is out, because I mean it. Logan is extremely advanced with his language. And it's funny because lots of people will tell me that. And I'm like, you don't even know. Like nobody sees the extent to which Logan talks like we do. Like other people see snippets, but with us, the kind of words, like his vocabulary is insane. I'm trying to like remember what it was that he said this morning, but he said he goes, Daddy, do you want to go outside and listen to the birds in the distance? I'm like, what? Who are you? Like he has so much language. And like I said, while I believe 50% of that is nature, and I can't take credit for it, and I don't know what kind of child I'm going to have left or have next, God willing, I will also say hand in hand, we have been purposefully teaching him every single day of his life. It's not casual in the sense of just like, whatever. Like it is, but it isn't, in the sense of like he shows interest in something, we meet him there. Like he's looking at labels, we go, do you want to know those letters? Like it's integrated. Learning is integrated into his day-to-day life all throughout the day. And there is a time and a place and a season for all people, right, to sit down and focus and work. And I think that that's important. But I think it's bizarre that we have this concept that like that is what education is, and everyone has to do it from a really young age, and like get your butt in the seat and like don't move. It just doesn't resonate with me. And we'll see how my kid grows up and develops and what's right for him. That's a lot of it too, is just like you got to see how your kids are and cater to what makes sense to their needs, their skills, your family's day-to-day setup. But yeah, in general, I think if you're a functioning adult that loves your children and wants to see what's best for them, it's like, then just roll with it. You're going to naturally go towards wanting to make sure that they're taught well, wanting to make sure that they have all of the resources that they need to learn, to do projects, to meet people, to grow, and all of that. So that was a long tangent. Whoa. Okay, someone said, how do you deal with a family that thinks you are strange for all of your holistic ways? I ignore them. Not fully, but it's kind of just like, I don't know, people are on like medications that it's not like the topic of your whole conversation, or people, do diet cleanses and like all kinds of things. I just think you have the right to do what you want, and you have the right to not talk about it, especially if the people that you're around like don't support it, or they don't get it, or really a step beyond that, they don't want to hear you out as to why you're going down that path. You can just do your thing and you don't have to talk about it. And that might be like a really annoying answer, because it's not really an answer, but kind of like you can just do your thing, and it's okay if other people don't support you. If your decisions and your habits make a change in your life, or support you in the way that you want them to support you and make a change in your life, other people are going to see that. And if it's right for them, they're going to ask you questions. They're going to want to talk to you about it. So just do your thing. Don't worry about it with other people. Most people love talking about themselves anyways. So if you might feel like it's all eyes on you, but if you just like don't bring it up, or you turn things around and ask them questions about what's going on in their life, oftentimes you can probably get away without having to even talk about it, honestly. Okay, someone asked me my favorite YouTubers. They said I did this video before and they loved it. So my favorite YouTubers literally change like every couple of weeks, because I just get in the mood for one thing, then I get in the mood for another thing. So this doesn't really mean anything. I just want to throw this out there. I mean, it does, yay to those YouTubers, but I mean, it doesn't mean anything in the sense of like, these are my favorite YouTubers. That was a really aggressive voice. I just mean like, these are some people I've really been liking watching in recent months. One of them is this girl named Jessica Kent. So she is a prison YouTuber. A little odd, I know. But basically she served a few years in prison, like in New York and then in Arkansas. And I have just been binging her videos because I find it fascinating. I'm one of those people that like, I have like issues with almost every institution. I feel like that's not, issues is a strong word, but it's an appropriate word. So many institutions in our country, I have a lot of like questions about, and I'm trying to understand more. Everything from like the medical institution, universities, police, military, prisons. Like I find all of it very fascinating. And obviously she was an inmate, like I said. So it's been really interesting hearing her stories, and her experience in prison. I'm one of those people that like, I'm a little girl from Los Angeles that knows nothing about prison, but I do feel like in my heart of hearts, like something's not right. And like some things have to be reformed, for lack of a better word, or that's a very highly used word, like prison reform. But that is kind of how I feel. Like it seems like, being a girl who knows nothing about anything, right? Like looking in at prison, it doesn't really seem like, it seems like the treatment that a lot of these inmates are getting is not setting them up to be people that would end up being our neighbors. Does that make sense? Like it almost seems like, if you're not going to treat these people well, or try to help them reintegrate healthfully, which I know you can't force anyone to make decisions. So keep in mind, I know nothing, but this is just my current state. If you can't help them reintegrate in a healthful way, back into society and being our neighbors, like, why are they alive? Like, why don't we just kill them then? And I don't really mean that. I'm not sitting here being like, kill them. I just mean like, it's a thought for like, why aren't we doing a better job at that? I mean, and I don't know anything. Maybe other places are doing a great job. And obviously she's one chick telling her stories. Like, I don't know. But I've always found the whole idea of prison to be very interesting. And, you know, one thing, speaking of which, on like the health side of things that I find really fascinating, similarly to like hospitals, or at least my experience with hospitals, I think it's really interesting when you have people like trapped in a situation like that, like they're sick and in bed or they're locked up in prison and you're not feeding them real food. But that's just because, once again, going back to my worldview, I think food is so integral to someone's behavior and their day-to-day life and the decisions that they make, that if you're not actually feeding them nutritionally dense food, I don't even know how, like, there are diseases that come from nutritional deficiencies. There's mental health issues, in my opinion, that come from nutritional deficiencies. And it's like, it doesn't need to be the Ritz. But if any of these stories are true, it's like, man, do we expect someone to walk out of that and be like ready to be my neighbor? Like, do I want them to be my neighbor? I don't know. I don't even know what I'm talking about. I feel like people are gonna be mad at me, but Jessica Kent has a really fascinating YouTube channel. So that's one of them. Another YouTube channel that I've been a fan of for a while now, I actually haven't listened to it as much this month, but I've gone on some serious binges on this channel, especially in the previous months leading up to this month. And that channel is called Mormon Stories. And it is mostly a long form interview type show with this guy named John DeLynn. And basically he used to be a part of the LDS church. He's not anymore. People within the LDS church is kind of what I'm generally gathering, which it makes sense, like, do not like him. He is now like a secular humanist, kind of like leaning on the side of Buddhism. And he does long form, most of his videos, or at least my favorites, are long form interviews with people who used to be Latter-day Saints and are no longer a part of the church. And most of those people end up falling into the atheist camp. Some of them end up being agnostic. Some of them end up being like non-denominational traditional Christians for a while, like Protestants, before they then end up being atheists or agnostic. But he does interviews with other people as well. He did an interview with this woman who actually used to be on staff at Willow Creek Church years ago. So she was a non-denominational Protestant Christian, so not even a Mormon. John says on his channel that he's not anti-religion. I don't believe you, John, if you're watching. I don't believe you. But I find his stories fascinating. I find it very interesting to hear where people are coming from and how they get to the place that they're, you know, currently at the end of that journey. So yeah, that girl that used to be on staff at Willow Creek, she ended up like becoming an improv comedian, like with Second City, and now she lives in LA. And just, I find long form interviews to be fascinating in general, but I've also learned a ton about the LDS church in like the last 7 years. And so that's also just kind of fits into that whole world of like stuff I've been learning, and it's very fascinating. So those are two channels that I've really been enjoying. Honestly, that's super random. Those are the only two I'm going to shout out right now. It's really random. I'll have to think more because I can touch on this again in the future. Oh, I feel like, actually, just kidding. If we're going to stay on a light topic, I really enjoy Farmhouse on Boone. Who doesn't enjoy Lisa? Farmhouse on Boone. A little bit of Farmhouse on Boone. How many times can I say her channel name? I love her stuff. I also really love Bumblebee Apothecary. She is really great and really full of information. Yeah, those are some of the people. I guess that's where I'm going to stop. Those are a lot of the different types of content I've been watching. Okay, someone asked me birth prep that helped me do it unmedicated. Top number 1 tip. You ready for this top tip, Zoe? She's ready for the top tip. Listen to birth stories. That was the number 1 thing that I did, because even though going to this next time, there might be some things I do differently leading up to actually being in labor, in general, I kind of think that if like you really want to do an unmedicated birth, like this is it, specifically if it's a home birth, that's kind of, I should have narrowed in on that. You need to hear other women's stories so you can get mentally prepared. For better or for worse, I was really ready to be in pain. I was like, all right, This is going to be crazy because I had listened to so many birth stories leading up to it. So that's really not a good answer. And honestly, when I went into labor, everything went out the window. Like I felt like I was just trying to survive. You guys know I started in the middle of the night and I let Dan sleep for like 5 hours while I just labored in my tub. That's something I did. I filled up my tub with warm water. But in general, I think the best prep you can do for an unmedicated birth or a home birth or a birthing center birth is to listen to birth stories and get your head in this space of accepting that birth is natural and normal unless there's an emergency, right? But in general, it's natural and it's normal, and you're going to get through this because you're going to hear all these other stories of women that got through it. And that is my number one tip. Ooh, someone asked opinions on gun laws and guns in general. I'm a typical like old school American in the sense that I totally believe in the right to bear arms. And that's pretty much it. I think people should have the right to not only have guns, but also carry them. Each state obviously has different laws, and I prefer living in a state where people can carry guns. I definitely come from the camp of I don't think it's about the gun. I think it's about the person. I think that people, it's very interesting. I heard the statistic once that, the US is leading for gun violence, for like mass gun violence, but they're not actually leading in terms of like youth murders. The comparison was school shootings. And how many kids are being killed in school shootings a year. And I think the comparison was directly, I think it was to England, honestly. You can go fact check this, but I'm pretty sure what I'm remembering. So we greatly, it might have been Australia. Now I'm second guessing myself. We greatly outpace them, even though that's a dark word for that, in terms of school shootings and children dying that way. But in terms of actual children being murdered, they surpass us by a lot, according to this chart that I was reading. And to me, assuming that this information, was real, that backs up obviously my worldview, which is that it's not about the weapon, it's about the person, and that people will find ways to act out if they want to. And I know people will say, well, we have to make it harder for them to act out. But I don't really agree with that. I really think that it's important to maintain this tension between the government and its citizens. I think keeping citizens armed is important. But like I said, if you make it harder for them, assuming those numbers were correct, then they're obviously going to find another way. So great, you've made it harder, but now it's something else. And I think that data is worth taking into consideration because I think it's very easy to look at something and be emotionally moved by it and feel like, well, that's what we have to do because our emotions are so heightened at the horror of the visual images and thinking about kids that have been shot in schools. It's horrifying, but you have to almost step back and look at the actual data, in my opinion, right? And then you look at it, and if that's true, it's okay, well, there's still tons of kids dying over here being murdered in other ways. So even though you've made it harder for people to get guns, you've just ushered them into another type of weapon. That's the thing, right? Everybody can agree that someone who is mentally unstable and is not there shouldn't have a gun. But that's the bottom line, is who is the person deciding who's mentally unstable. If we've seen anything, we've seen in the last couple of years that there are definitely not only two different camps, but many different camps around how people feel about other people and their mental state, whether they think that they're a sane person or not, whether they think they're making good moral decisions or not. And so that's part of it too, is it's of course crazy people shouldn't have guns. And then you go, so who's deciding who's crazy? And then some people might say, well, the doctors are deciding who's crazy. And then I would say, okay, well, that doesn't sit right with me because doctors are corrupt. Just like people. That's nothing against doctors. That's people. And it's well documented, over and over and over throughout medical history, that doctors have been, they can be paid off for things. They can be manipulated. Studies are manipulated all the time. So it's, that's kind of where I stand. I said I wasn't going to go off on a whole rant, so I'm going to pause myself there and go on to the next question. But that gives you a little bit of insight as to where my head is surrounding all of this. Ooh, this is a good question. Someone asked, do you feel a lot of pressure to be clean, crunchy, and healthy all the time? And my answer is no. I feel a desire to nourish my body and care for my body, this gift of a body that God has given me, and to care for my future eggs that might turn into children. Like, I care about all of that, but I don't feel pressure for that. And this is a conversation I've had with a few friends recently. And I don't know if this is your stance. I'm kind of like taking it and running off into a different, direction with it. But I feel like sometimes there are people that aren't really in the super crunchy, I don't even know how to word this, like health-centered, holistic space that will look in, okay, this happens a lot in the birthing side of things. I have noticed this over and over and over again. People who aren't really into that or aren't really deep in that space will be on the outside looking in, and they'll make comments like, you don't get a gold star for birthing without an epidural, or like, it's not a contest. And whenever someone says that, I'm like, oh, you thought this was a contest? Like, I've never, ever had the mentality of like, it's a contest. Like, I can't wait to show everyone else and make them feel bad about themselves and be the best, like at whatever it is in terms of health stuff, right? Like birthing or eating a certain way. In my mind, I'm thinking either A, who are the people that you're talking to that are like showing you that this is their supposed mentality? Or like, are you projecting because that's how you want to like you would feel about it, and that's the perspective that you're taking and approaching this? Or you're just really not in the space and you really don't understand people who are in this space and their motives. Because everyone that I know that's in like the natural birthing space or really into nutrition and like basic homesteading and sourcing food locally and healthfully, their motivation is never from a place of like competitiveness or making other people feel bad or like, yeah, like I said, like it's a competition. Their motivation is caring for the body that God gave them. Honestly, a lot of the times I know a lot of faith crunch type people, if that's how you want to word it, caring for their family, caring for the earth, doing things the way that they think it was really intended to be. And therefore it's going to actually be easier. Or like in the case of birth, right? A lot of people, well, pretty much everyone who believes in like natural unmedicated birthing, part of why they believe that is also, there's a lot of reasons there, but also that the healing is better from it, that you're going to bounce back faster by doing it, in my worldview, the way that God intended it to be done. And that's not, I'm not against emergency intervention. Like, thank God when doctors are able to step in with modern technology and modern medical things and save a life. Like, that's amazing. I always feel like I have to say that because people get mad otherwise. But yeah, no, I don't feel a pressure. I feel a joy and an excitement to continue to learn and continue to figure out how to grow my own food and source my own food and learn tips from fellow homestead, crunchy, whatever, mamas. But no, if you're someone on the outside looking in at like the health community or the birthing community and you're thinking that, I'm here to tell you, I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself. Never has getting a gold star been my motivation ever. I never would have thought that I would have been a natural home birther ever. It was literally like a type of thing where like my feet were to the fire and it's like, okay, I got to deliver this baby. How am I going to get this baby out of me? And then just going down the hole and realizing like, oh, darn it, I think this is the best way to do it for me and for the baby and for my family. And I think this is what I have to do. Like, this is what I have to do. It was never, I don't know. That's kind of a side note, but it really bothers me when people peek into the health world and place motivations on us and go, you just think like you're trying to earn your whatever. It's like, what? Literally just trying to care for myself and my family. And these are the conclusions I've come to. This is really what I think is best now. So anyways, that was kind of a rant too. Okay, I'm going to end on this question because I haven't talked about this stuff for a while, but someone asked me tips for keeping your marriage loving and exciting. And so, yeah, I'm going to answer that. I guess first thing I have to say is, to those of you that don't know, Dan and I have been married now for 14 years, I believe. We've been together for like 16 years. Yeah, I'm 35. Yep. We've been together for 16 years, married for 14 years. And we were just having this conversation this morning, kind of. Basically just saying like, we've been through a lot together. And we're still fairly young, and that definitely doesn't get past us. We're like, whoa, if God gives us a long life, like we've already experienced so much and we have so much ahead of us. And I guess what I would say to you, and this is something I'm always working on. I feel like relationships, just like everything in life, right, have to be constantly tended to. And we're always working on it. But what I will say after the last 14 years, 16 years is communication, which I know is really annoying to hear because that's what everybody says, but it's so important to communicate with your significant other and to be honest about your thoughts about things in life. And also honesty allows you guys to really actually have more conversation. So if you've ever been in a place in your marriage where it's like, almost like your roommates are like, oh, we aren't having like those interesting conversations anymore, I would challenge you to ask yourself if you've really been being honest with your husband, or if you've just shut down out of laziness, or like, well, we've already talked about everything, or I don't know. I just want to encourage honesty and conversation between you guys. I think that's really important. In terms of how to make your marriage exciting, I don't really know. Dan and I joke a lot. I think joking is good. I think laughing is good. I think dreaming of things that you want to do in life together, the kind of life that you want to build together, that's pretty exciting. And if you guys can get on the same page in your dream building and what kind of moves you want to make next and life you want to build, even if it's vague, because sometimes it can like freak someone out for you to get too specific. So even if it's just vague interests and like ideas of where life could go, I think that that's exciting and important as well. I will also say this, pray for your spouse. Continue to pray for them. Don't quit on praying for them. I think that praying for your spouse not only is just good, right? Bringing your spouse's concerns to the Lord, but also it does something to your heart as well to pray to God for this person or about this person that you're connected with. Just does something to the softening of your heart and your like loving feelings towards them. The last thing I will say is something that I've learned in a different way over the course of the last 6 months. I'm going to try not to go into too much of a tangent, but the gist, and this, I learned this before, but it's changed, and that's what I mean in a different way, is to think about how you can serve your spouse. What skills do you specifically have? Because not usually often, well, whatever, we'll word it that way. You'll marry someone who's probably your opposite or has strengths where you're weak, or you have strengths where they're weak. And to look into their life and go, okay, where are my strengths and their weaknesses? Like, where do they align so that I can step in and serve them in a really specific way? And I think that honestly, something magical can happen in a relationship when you do that, when you take the time to think like that. Not just how can I serve them, but what are my strengths and what are their weaknesses? And how can I specifically target those weaknesses with my strengths to lift them up and care for them and really be the definition of a team in that way, coming together to, like I said, not only serve each other, but serve each other in your very specific weaknesses and strengths, if that makes sense. I've had an experience that's played out in our life in the last 6 months in some specific ways that, like I said, I'm not going to go off on a tangent about, at least right now, but it's been really crazy to witness. Like, wow, I prayed for that. I wanted that. I went after that. And look at what God's done with that, with allowing me to step into his weaknesses with my strengths in ways that I had never thought of before. And I pray for more of that. So that's it, guys. I'm going to go now because I'm starting to get uncomfortable. I've been sitting here on this floppy couch for a while and it's time to go make some lunch. So I will, God willing, see you guys back here soon with another new video. I don't know if you guys can hear Dan doing construction work in the garage. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Don't forget to check out my waitlist if you are interested in getting information on my upcoming course. And I will, God willing, see you guys back here soon with another new video. Bye, guys.